I want to explore the church and what has been the Black Church's response to this context that we've been talking about. We showed examples this morning of different ways in which the Black Church has responded or not responded in the context of the Lord. What I want to do is, for teaching purposes, use three paradigms. It's not either or, it's more or less. Each church can look at this and see some of itself maybe in it. Pieces of it in it. But in each historical moment, one of these paradigms tends to dominate in terms of how Black Church thinks and has operated historically. And the question in front of us is, do we need a different kind of theology to leapfrog and start a new struggle inside of inner cities and rural areas, just like we've had to do in other periods of Black Church life? So I'll talk about that. So the first of these is the traditional. And traditional approach that we historically take to be, we wait for something to happen, and when it happens, then we respond to it. In the case of something, could be folks that don't have house burning down, and need clothing, and need food, we may put a food pantry, so it's an individual congregation response. It tends to be focused on individuals who are in need. In some situations, we look at people in service and client relationships. I've seen churches when we've had homeless people who have come in, that they never talk to them. They feed them and then they go out. They never engage them because they're real people and they have stories and histories. And, so sometimes we respond to them in a service-client relationship, and they respond back to us as servants and clients. That is, I know folks in communities where folks will go from church to church knowing exactly what they can get from each church on a rotational basis. They play the game to get things, and we allow it because we tend not to think that's what we do. Slightly coercive. What I mean by slightly coercive, sometimes we say you can't have nothing to eat unless you allow us to work you over. Jesus, you got to get worked over by Jesus before we let you eat. Yeah, let you sleep and eat. And as I said, over the years, Dr. Moss was here, I've worked with thousands of churches and pastors over the years. So this is not everybody, but there's a strand of us that will do this. We tend to non-renewable investments. What I mean is, if we have a clothing pantry or food pantry, when that goes out, it's gone. It doesn't renew itself unless we go out and get it. Unless we go out and renew it, try to put the resources in to be able to do it. And so kind of examples of that are food pantries, clothing pantries, emergency money. Some churches can provide emergency dollars to people that need it. Counseling services we may provide people. A safe space for people to be prayer. And now there's another dynamic. As the church gets bigger and larger, sometimes that churches take over multiple things that they do. So large congregations, the mega churches, tend to try to create, and I call it a wraparound church. That is, they try to cover everything for the membership. That is social service stuff, clubs, you name it. If you go to different networks, you'll see different kinds of these wraparound realities that these churches try to do. But for most of our churches, this will tend to be the smaller congregations. And there's pieces off of it. I know some churches have provided car ministries. That is helping people buy a car by providing loans. And so it's the creativity of the individual congregation that is focused to do. And people do what they can do. This is important. This is not either or. This is a more or less question about approaches. A lot of our congregations will tend to do this, but they feel they don't have assets, they feel they don't have the resources to be able to do more things. They'll part that up. There's volunteers. So people will volunteer, they participate in volunteer efforts to help those things. Again, so sometimes folks will get involved in going on disaster stuff, on missions. But this is our traditional kind of approach. It doesn't seek to change the dynamic in the place. It's not trying to do that. It responds to what happens, but it's not trying to change what's happening upstream. It catches what comes downstream. All right? Then there is the collective or mutual aid approach that the Black church has historically taken, and has played a profound part in this country, which is, it involves multiple institutions, multiple congregations. It is geographically centered. It focuses on spaces and sites, multiple. It's what I call the federation approach to creation of something. We'll come back to this. Its invention creates new institutions. It seeks to get to self-sufficiency and independence for the Black community. In segregated time, in Jim Crow, in that structured caste system, slavery by another name, living in a segregated world, we were not allowed to enter into any white world elements. That is, you could not be in a business in the white world, you could not shop in the white world, you could not, you had to create your own institutional reality. And that's where these are bases of power for the Black community in every state where Black folk were. And what are some of the things we created? Burial societies, credit unions, insurance products of all kinds for our people to have insurance. Mutual farmers, in North Carolina came out of church growth. Church being a part. Almost every one of these you'll find churches played a role in the creation and the driving force, and not all the time, but a significant amount of that time. W.E. Du Bois had actually studied in the early 1900s on this, these networks of things that Black folks created, and did a little bit, kind of the first study of this. There's been more recent studies on cooperative movement among Black folk historically, which again now is highlighting this. So housing development, churches that have come together and built housing in communities or individual congregations. They had the resources to build housing developments. A lot of senior housing has been built by Black churches across the country. They've gotten access to federal dollars that have made it available to be able to build senior housing and to be able to leverage their resources to do that. Business startups. We've had networks of Black churches to help businesses get started under government. So that is kind of the growth. This is significant. This has happened in many historical periods, more so in the period of deep segregation is when this was dramatically created and put in place. And it's what triggered, and I'll get to the next, it's part of what triggered the racial violence against African American communities from 1890 to 1930. This process, this building, this investment in the seeing of independent bases of power and independence in both rural, semi-rural settings and urban areas where our folk were. And the third kind of paradigm is one I'll call the transformational framework of the church, Black church. And this is the larger, this is fundamentally the seeing something new and doing it. For example, our Black denominations are that. The creation of the AME, the Methodist Network, the Baptist, these Black denominations were transformative in what they did. They created a different dynamic in the church world for Black folks. It was not just national, but international in impact over time. That's a transformative strategy. Some folks decided that there needed to be a Black church, independent of the white church that refused to recognize them as human beings, and said to them that you can go to heaven, but you can still be my slave. Sure. Yeah. Some of these organizations are part of what I talk about. They get to scale. They impact multiple places and communities simultaneously. Not just our denominations, but our sororities, our fraternities, Masons, Eastern Star. These are all federations. They all exist inside of Black life. They own property. They drive some of this in terms of talent and energy. Black cooperatives. There's been a very rich Black cooperative movement in this country from the beginning. Again, undermined it later, but again, attempt to do this and organizing this in rural areas The Colored Farmers Alliance. How many of you ever heard of the Colored Farmers Alliance? Colored Farmers Alliance was put together in the 1890s to fight what had happened with the first big disaster, depression, farm depression, and then the fact that a number of African Americans were still in debt peonage. That is, they were still sharecropping, and so there was just this constant continuing. And so this organizing effort was of black farmers and black agricultural workers. At its height, it almost had 1 million members. It was all across the South. It was part of what was called a populist revolt in the United States in the 1890s. And there was a white populist movement of farmers who were fighting the same thing, corporate takeover, corporate dominance of agriculture, keeping them in peonage and suffering. And then there was a black parallel development of this, the Colored Farmers Alliance, where all of the different separate parts together. And they called for a black cooperative infrastructure and a radical restructuring of agriculture in the South and in the Midwest, along with the white populist movement. This movement was the largest movement of its kind in the country's history. It failed probably because they could not overcome racism inside of it. But they came to power in a number of different states. In North Carolina, black and white populists took power in North Carolina in the 1890s.
Did you say racism within?
Within the movement is what killed it. And they couldn't overcome it. The white populists even worked with black populists and helped take power in these different places. The reaction to that was so strong, and people kept hammering them. A number of them didn't necessarily believe in equality between black and white. It was transactional in this relationship. And over time, they just could not handle it. They just collapsed under the pressure of it. And the populist movement eventually loses, but it cut its connection from black populists. Okay? And turned kind of to the idea, well, they are inferior, so we just need to know. So that's what killed it in North Carolina. Some of you may have heard about Wilmington, North Carolina. And we call it was the coup d'etat. Wilmington was one of those cities that blacks and whites had gained power, populists had gained power. The White Klan and the others were upset about it. They organized a militia and military folk, and they came in and violently took power in Wilmington, Delaware. Killed off black leadership, ran them out, burned down all the buildings, burned down property, ran them out of town. Nobody in the state government did anything to do this. This is the first coup d'etat in United States history took place in Wilmington, North Carolina. I say that because this is why this was done. It was done to create a space, protection, organizing, and transformative ideas. So these three paradigms exist. Sometimes they exist together, sometimes more or less. And so one of the questions you can ask yourself is, where are we today? Where in these paradigm framework do we sit, more or less? I have my feelings about that, but you know where you see it. So that the question then is, how do you change this? How do you move? Is there a need for a transformational strategy? And what I'm going to do is walk you through a case study of a transformational strategy that has not yet, never got to the scale we thought it might get to, but what it did and how it did it. And how it could be out of the second group, the collective mutual aid part, and then the transformative part. This is the Nehemiah housing strategy that the network that I was a senior person in, called the Industrial Areas Foundation, developed first in New York City. Then it spread to different places, including Memphis. The key elements of this strategy were, you have to know what New York was like in the 70s. New York was full of abandoned, burnt out properties. It was like Dresden after World War II. There would be blocks and blocks and blocks of vacant properties, burnt out properties. There was significant arson in New York during this period. So the landlords would burn their properties down and collect the insurance on the properties. So if you drove to Harlem, you drove to South Bronx, you drove anywhere in some areas in Brooklyn, you saw this incredible amount of just vacant. And the only thing that might be sitting there might be a bodega or something sitting there, and usually those properties that were sitting there were used by drug dealers as cover. They called themselves grocery stores, but they had like 2 or 3 things in the window, and then in the back they were doing the drug thing. And you might have churches, and that'd be it. And then there'd be blocks and blocks of vacant stuff. So this was nothing. The land had no value, it had no street signs up, you didn't know where you were driving. You was like you were driving in a rural community when you were in a city. You had to look at the corner, see there's a stop, no stop sign, no street lights necessarily, some reason, and no street signs. So you didn't know what street you're on. So you got to remember, you were driving past the garbage can on that corner, even to the left of that one, there was a whatever. So there was, the value of the land, for all intents and purposes, was 0. Nobody wanted it. But our organization of churches in this area said that, you know, the book of Nehemiah opened up to the pastors in these churches an idea. Now, these churches that were involved in Brooklyn were black and white and Latino. They were Roman Catholic, they were Protestant churches, black and white churches, of many denominations, and they were pulled together to form the organization we call East Brooklyn Congregations, EBC. And EBC did a number of things before it decided to go after this Nehemiah stuff, this housing stuff. And the key to the strategy is this. We ain't going to build no 1 or 2 houses. We ain't doing no habitat houses, and I'll tell you why. We have to build 5,000 single-family homes to rebuild and repopulate these spaces. That's what it will take to rebuild these places from the bottom up, to reclaim this space. And people looked at us like we were crazy. So our team there, we got all crazy, and nobody can do this. And nobody can build an affordable house in New York City for the kind of folk that you're going to build a house for. And found a guy by the name of, what is his name? A builder who had built housing in New York and said he could build an affordable house if somebody would let him do it. So of course our team went to see this guy. He was a millionaire, he had built a lot of houses. And then they said, well, how are we going to do this? We got to control it, we got to try to figure it out. So here are the elements of the Nehemiah strategy that was knocked out by pastors and lay leaders of our churches in this community. We have to raise the trust fund money ourselves. We have to control the money that does the construction of the houses, the construction fund, the construction loan fund. So that was the first thing. We have to control it, and by controlling that trust fund with our own money, we can hire our own builder and control the process of its built. It's a loan fund, it's a revolving loan fund that the churches and the denominations were to give at no interest. So that was the goal, and the goal was to try to get to somewhere between $7 and $10 million for this revolving loan fund in 1982, I think. Now, so I said, where are you going to raise that money? Well, the rule was every church that was in the community, that was part of our organization, in its denomination, was responsible for going to their denomination and trying to help raise money for this loan fund. The promise was after 7 years, every dollar would be returned to the church and denomination that gave. It was a loan. So that money was going to go back to the church. That was the promise. The only thing that people were asked to give up was the interest on the money. That was the contribution. So that we could get that no interest loan to the builder. First church that committed, this is the irony of this was, there was one Missouri Synod Lutheran church in this bombed out area of East New York, Brooklyn. Had less than 100 members. But they went to their bishop in the Lutheran church and said, we want you to contribute to this strategy. Now, if you don't know the Missouri Synod Lutheran Church, it is very conservative. It is one of the most conservative denominations in the country. They don't even think other Lutherans are Lutherans. And I'm not making this up, I'm telling you. They believe the Missouri Synod Lutheran Church believes that they are the embodiment of Luther. They are very conservative theologically. They saw something in this for their church. They gave the first $1 million. And they had one little church there. That's all they had. They gave the first $1 million. Not when it was on to something. Because theologically, this made sense to them. This idea of rebuilding. This idea of Nehemiah going back and rebuilding the community, the wall, and reestablishing, recreating, and supporting the church, rebuilding. So they gave the first. Then other groups started giving, denominations started giving. The Roman Catholic Church gave a significant amount of money. It was about $4 million. Their bishop, Bishop McGovern, was a power player in New York. He saw this as consistent with the church's feeling and thought that this made sense. Now, the Baptist church doesn't have this kind of denominational thing. We had to figure, how is the money going to come from the Baptist churches? Well, the goal was that for every $1,000 that a big denomination like the Roman Catholic Church, the Baptists give at least $1. 1% at least. And so over $100,000 was raised from these Baptist churches to match up with $1 million contribution from the Missouri Synod, for example. Okay? Every denomination had to be on the trust fund. You had to give money. You could not be on the trust fund if your denomination did not contribute. So these were the biggest contributors. There were others that gave. The total fund came to $8 million. So this loan fund was at $8 million roughly. We needed the land. Any strategist has to get the land. Now, nobody wanted the land, but the mayor of the city of New York, Mayor Cox, hated us. Long story, but because we had another bishop in Queens, and I was the organizer, and he didn't like us. But we had to get the mayor's commitment to allow this land, which was sitting fallow, that had been taken over for tax purposes or whatever reason, to turn it over to us. And we were going to ask him for a $10,000 soft second. And I'll come back to this in a minute. Now, his man didn't like us, hated our guts, but we had to go get this money, get this commitment from him. So who did we take for this meeting? Reverend Johnny Ray Youngblood, who was pastor of St. Paul's Baptist Church, one of the largest Baptist churches in Brooklyn at that time, and Bishop McGovern, and the organizer, Mike Eaton. The only 3 people who went to see him. McGovern was a major power player. The Roman Catholic Church was very powerful in New York. So there at the meeting with the mayor, true story, meeting with the mayor. The mayor's acting, I ain't doing this, Bishop, all due respect, I'm not going to give you all no land or nothing like that. And the money, oh no. And so Bishop McGovern looked at him, went over and said, yes, you will. He said, and if you steal it for us, I'll absolve you. Ooh. Ooh. And now the man knew what that meant. That meant the bishop was serious. He was not playing, and you're going to do this now. You want to be reelected, you want to get the capital vote, you're going to have to play ball. So, he agrees to turn over acres of this land. He agrees he's going to help support the soft second mortgage. He does not say is that I'm going to have to muck it up the process, so it'll take too long for you to get started and frustrate you when I do it. So you got the land now checked off, y'all. So we got land, we got the funds, we got the scale decision, which is to try to get to 5,000 houses, try and form the entire community, the neighborhoods that have been gone now. Now we got to negotiate for mortgages. This is going to be home ownership. And people are saying, well, who are the people in these communities that are going to buy these houses? You know, there's some poor black and Latino people living in these areas primarily. What money they got? Well, everybody, most of these communities are working. You live in New York City, you're working, you can still be living poor, but working and making a living. So people were working. It wasn't that people weren't working, had jobs. Because they find housing that was affordable to them. So we went to the state mortgage company and said, look, we're going to try and build 5,000 houses. The guys got big. You weren't talking about it. We said, we want you to give us a mortgage package for every one of the houses we're going to build. We want you to reduce the interest rate. And at that time, if you remember interest rates during that period, if you can remember, they were about 20% in some places, 15% in some places. It's terrible during that period. We got them to put it below 10%. So come down to 9, I think it was 9, 8.5 to 9%, which is a major drop in, what the interest would be on the loans. And so we got a commitment for a package of mortgage money to guarantee that those mortgages will be made available to the Nehemiah home buyers. We got the mayor to agree to a $10,000 source right down. We got the land for free. We have our own builder. So these first houses that we built, first we built some models of houses, so people to see what they want to get for their money. Now, we built 2-story houses with some of them 3 bedrooms, some 4 bedrooms, 2 baths, and a basement. And we said that we would build these houses and sell them to people at around $45,000. This is 1980. People said, you can't do it, you can't build a house. Well, the builder that we had, I.D. Robbins, his name, says, I can build this house. So how do you get a house to be $45,000? Where do you get the land for free? You get a mortgage, which is possible for people. You get a builder who says he can do it. And you see if you can build it. And why do they like this? Because when you control the construction, and you give them zero money to build with, in a city where you have to borrow to build 15%, maybe 12% to build, oh, you're getting it for zero? Oh, subcontractors love this. Why they love working for him and for us is because they got paid within 4 days. Unheard of for contractors to be paid that quick. We control money. So you get the stuff done, you get paid. And so the first houses were shown, we put them on these 2 corners where there was nothing but vacant stuff, and these 2 model homes were built. People lined up around the blocks to come see this house. And we told them that this house was going to run anywhere between $45,000 to $50,000 once we put in the pieces that we put in. And you're going to have to put down a $5,000 down payment. And people went crazy in the so-called liberal community, saying that liberal church community, oh, poor people can't afford a $5,000 down payment. They can't do it. They won't be able to find the money. We pre-sold every house. When people realized they could get a house for this amount, come on. They went and found a way to get that house. They went to workshops on home ownership. They found it. Even some of our own church members in the EBC churches, well, at first didn't believe this was possible and waited. Because we could not build all at once. We had to go neighborhood by neighborhood. This is one of the great decisions that these churches made together. We know everybody can't get built first. So they made a commitment that we're going to start here in this one community, then we're going to move it over here, then over here, and everybody would wait their turn and support each other through the process. That was a major commitment and a breakthrough. We had to get started. So these houses were built. We pre-sold every house. That meant the loan fund keeps going. Keeps going, keeps going. Today in Brooklyn, there are over 5,000 of these. In the South Bronx, there's over 1,500, I think. This is continuing, by the way. This is not stopped. In Memphis, we did one whole community rebuild for about 175 houses in one little area. Which made a big difference in the downtown area of Memphis. This has been done in Washington, D.C. Now, what was the impact of building this many houses? We wouldn't build unless we could build 50 to 100 at a time. What did that do? That drove all the drug dealers out, which is knocking all the buildings. So drug dealing went away in most of these areas. Once you build that many houses, other things start to happen. Parks got fixed. Train stations got redone. Police started working the neighborhoods, but now there were people there to connect to. Schools got repopulated with young families again. And so these places transform themselves. They begin to change. They become different places. And today, in the year 2020, that $45,000 house that you hustled to get that $5,000 down payment for is worth approximately $650.
Yeah, that's what's going on.
There's your Edinburgh in spades. In the housing crisis of 2008 and 9, we did not lose 2 Nehemiah homes anywhere in the United States. Folks paid that note. Folks held on to that house because they knew what it meant for their families. They knew what it meant for them. Crime dropped so much in these neighborhoods that the police stopped sending regular patrols through them. We're going to go to the places that need them. Our people, you have to see the folk that became homeowners. Walk different, look different, look at their church different. Look at their churches different, look at their, all their friends, the people they got to know, the Latinos, the whites, all the different denominations that fought this fight together to do this. It changed a mindset, it changed an understanding of church. And it was deeply rooted in the book of Nehemiah as a central theological context for this strategy. Any questions about this? I'll stop at this point. Any questions you have about this? Yes?
When you talk about this model, I can't help but thinking about how this model has been presented in my area. I can't help but think about this model that's presented in that area. However, what happens is that decline doesn't leave as it did in these communities. It may come into the community, has still remains there, and all the work that was done is then.
That has never happened in the Nehemiah community that we have built.
And can you tell us why?
Because the scale, when you change an entire place, when you change from renting to vacancy and you move it to home ownership or ownership of, people have an investment in these places. Let me tell you what happened. In New York, there's organized crime. There's a thing called the mafia. It exists. Well, the mafia controls a lot of what happens in the construction industry. Well, those people came to Reverend Youngblood and said, you're going to give us no show jobs in this project. And you're going to do it in life. And you know what's going to happen to you if you don't do it. Reverend Youngblood went back to the other pastors. They went to the members of their churches. Everybody was in the military or was a police person. And said, I want you to come to the church on this day, and I want you to come packed. So the day that the gangsters came back looking for their handout, they saw a packed church of black, Latino, and white folks packed. And they turned around and left and never came back. Like Nehemiah on the wall. One hand. That's why they don't come back. Because there's an investment. These people own these houses, they fight for them, they fought for them to have them, fought for these neighborhoods and communities. And it's scale that matters. Because everybody here has done this struggle together. They've been part of this struggle to get here. So it's a culture that changes. Why is this different than doing a habitat house or a little habitat neighborhood? I hope you see the difference. When you do habitat, a church, I don't know what they're asking for churches to do now, but it used to be $40,000 a church to do a habitat house. To do a habitat house, you can put $40,000 in. And then they build a habitat house, a lot of volunteers. But that's the one house. Now you take the $40,000 that they use for one habitat house and put that in a construction loan fund, you can do Nehemiah's. 200 churches to divide that 40,000 you can build in perpetuity because the process continues. You negotiate from a power position to the mortgage fund. You do all of that. But that requires the last part of this that matters is you have to build an organizing effort in that community that's committed to each other, to training and education, studying together, working together, investing together, willing to take risks together. Now, this is Gerald. You have something.
I haven't quite yet understood just how it worked mechanically or the difference between yours and Habitat. They made a $5,000 down payment. They must have paid off the rest of the mortgage also, otherwise there would be no fund to revolve.
That's correct. Well, they get a mortgage. The mortgage goes back in the fund.
Then they pay it off.
They still pay their mortgage, but they get a mortgage to buy the house. Then they pay the mortgage. The mortgage money that they got goes back to the fund. The fund is returned.
All right. So
They're getting their
the
mortgage.
fund gets the money from the.
Yes, that's correct, that's right. That's how the fund keeps replenishing itself.
Okay, but why is that not the same with Habitat?
That's not what Habitat does. Habitat has a $40,000 commitment to a house. Volunteers come and help build that house, so they keep the price down. They have volunteers build that house. They require that the person who gets the house has to put some sweat equity into it. And then there's other conditions attached to it before they get entitled to the house. That's one house built for $40,000 in volunteer sweat. Okay? This way, if you get the $40,000 contributed to a loan fund, that money keeps turning over and turning over and turning over and turning over, and you're building houses and houses and more houses and more houses. It is a different mindset. It is a different way of thinking about how you leverage resources. And most reason people do habitat houses is because it makes them feel good and their church feel good. That's okay. But that's not how you transform places. It requires thousands of units of housing. People get a chance to have decent housing. You have to think bigger than that.
I'm not doubting you, but I just haven't understood it yet. So let me ask you a question.
Sure.
There's no repayment of the $40,000 that Habitat puts into the house? The person takes possession without actually paying?
I don't know if they're given a mortgage. Does anybody gonna have that house? I think they're given a mortgage.
Yeah, they do
They are given a mortgage. But it's one person.
Okay,
You understand what I'm saying?
There's no volume.
There's no scale to this. There's no volume to this. There's no sense that we can do this. Now, can this be done in a rural area? Absolutely. Absolutely. If we were able to, that's why the audits matter. There is assets in rural Black church, Black community life. They don't have to be big, but they can be used to leverage denominational resources, others to be able to do this. Because as I said, in some of these rural communities, there's not enough adequate housing for people. And if there is housing, sometimes the quality of the housing is not good because there's no. A lot of our, I hate to say the South, we do not, landlords get all the power in the South. Tenants get nothing. You get a lease, and that lease can be defined any way you want to. If you do it, and that lease is over after a year, they give you once a month, they can tell you to get out of here. I mean, if you raise the same, I mean, it is not tenant friendly in most cases. And so, if you're going to rebuild or you're going to do something in the rural area, it's the same idea. Land, which we have plenty of, in rural communities. Some was held by government, school systems owned land, government owned land, land is held, tax foreclosure. We got lots of ways where public land sits there. Translate that, revision the space around the town center, maybe building towns within towns, but a similar approach. And the price to build housing in the rural areas is much less than it would be to build it in a city. It can be done. The scale can be done. As I said to you, it is rethinking how we use resources. It's rethinking how we think about what we have. And then leveraging the networks that we're tied to begin to do that. So, where people are investing a lot of money, a lot of our denominations may be investing significant money in missions overseas. Part of my argument has been we have to start to do some of that here.
Yeah.
We have to remember that these places, we have places in some of our communities that are dead, they're dying places. But somehow we've got to rethink where we're going to put resources to the scale that we're going to be required to help rebuild. Now, other things are going to have to be done. That's why I said the mindset that we have has to change. We have to think bigger, more creatively about how we use our assets and resources to do this. Any other questions about the particulars of the amount? And I'll walk quickly. Let's not scale, critical mass. If you get to scale, it's a large scale to transform an entire space. Because the other problem in habitat is if you just build a couple of habitat houses and they get swallowed up. When the young woman over here was saying, in areas where you build one or two houses in neighborhoods like this, they get swallowed up.
Yes.
They don't have enough oomph around them to help keep that situation good. The people who build there, if there's no other building there, their value of that house is almost nothing in these spaces. Because their appraised value is going to be tied to the number of abandoned properties sitting there. You hear me? And if you got 50 abandoned buildings next to your house, the valuation of your house is going to go like this. So there's no incentive to want to build there on the part of people. You have to give people an incentive to want to be building a place. And you want to control, this was different than gentrification. We control the development. We control who the house. These houses were affordable for people making minimum wage and 2 people in the household work. Back in 1980.
My question is, the Nehemiah project, you talking about the group that did this. What are we talking about?
It was called East Brooklyn Congregations. I was with, I for 35 years was an organizer and developer and part of the national team that ran what's called the Industrial Areas Foundation. The IF is the oldest, largest network of community organizers in the United States. We started organizing primarily in congregations in the 1970s. And this was one of the organizations that we started in the 1970s to build an interfaith, multiracial set of organizations that would do work like this in communities across the country. We came by invitation. So a group of pastors and denominational people would have to invite us to come. Dr. Gregory Moss, who's here, is one of those pastors who was part of our effort in Charlotte, North Carolina, when we started Help there. These are locally controlled organizations and locally owned organizations. And that's how we go. We meet with people, we say, here's the position upon which we will come. And part of it is to agitate you to have to organize before we actually show up. Once we see that you can do that, and you see that you can do that, then the person comes full time. So I moved for IF. I moved from New York to Baltimore, from Baltimore to Memphis. I started the first of these kind of congregational organizations in the South, ever done in the South. In Memphis, Nashville, Charlotte, Jackson, Mississippi, and going to the places that we organize these.
There are precedents in rural counties. I know out in Henry County, we have a lot of former tobacco farmers, black and white, and the Burley Tobacco Program back in the day was an example of regional farmers get together, agreeing to set limits and parity. They weren't going to grow more than their neighbors and compete against their neighbors, and they all, for quite a few years, had a really good tobacco thing going. Back when tobacco was okay. But the point was they agreed to the limits and not to outcompete their neighbor. And that allowed them to thrive together in a community. And globalization made that nearly impossible and killed the program. But it's another example of this idea of accepting the limits and your neighbor is not a competitor.
Now this is not easy. There were a lot of churches that didn't join this.
That's why I was asking that question.
A lot that didn't join. Now this is a minority of churches. Even if it's 40 of them, or 40 to 45, that's it. Out of a county that had literally over 2,000 churches. They did not do this in Harlem. We could not get the pastors in Harlem in the 70s to come together to do what was done in Brooklyn. And now we see what has happened in Harlem because of it. They could have gotten those brownstones for nothing in Harlem at that time. Those abandoned sites could have been gotten for literally nothing. But they had come in. They had significantly more resources in terms of the historic black churches there than the churches in Brooklyn had.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Dr. Taylor, because many pastors with that passion will hold up and back up on that passion because they can't get all of the churches together. And I'm so glad to hear you mention that everybody wasn't on board, but those who were on board don't did things.
You don't need everybody.
Yeah.
My rule of thumb has been,
Yes.
if you can get 5 or 10% of your churches in the community organized together, that would be more than enough. That means you can accept 90, 85 to 90 no's. And I say this to you, you have to be comfortable with no.
Amen.
I don't complain when the pastor says no. I just dust off my shoes and move on. And the challenge the agitation is to, do you see the shape our people are in? going to do about the situation that we find ourselves in? And then the creativity, I said, after Hurricane Katrina, and churches and black churches were down, houses were down, businesses were down, people were living in tents, people were living in half-built stuff. People said, Gerald, they're not going to come together. They never have historically come together. Why do you think in this moment they'll come together? I said, I don't know. I'm going to go down there and find out. So I did. I went down. The hotels were not ready yet. They were half ready. There was no electricity in some of the hotels. I had to find me a place to stay. I got in my car. I drove to each of these little places. There was gatherings of folks trying to, churches were trying to gather people together to try to provide, food and clothing and stuff like that. And I'd go to these meetings and I'd look around and try to find people, pastors, and say, listen, what? Do you want to do something? Yeah. I said, and then and when finally a couple of them said, Gerald, and one pastor of a very small church said, I want to learn how to do this. And Gulfport, Mississippi. I said, come on, I'm going to help you figure out how to do this. Every town I found somebody. A pastor, a couple of pastors, a couple of lay people. And said, this is like Kings 7. Dr. Moss said, the 4 lepers. This is where we were. 4 lepers sitting outside the gates. Starvation on the inside. Starvation in the end. And the 4 lepers are outcasts. It's like our black folk were outcasts in these places, in these communities. Outcasts sitting outside. And they made a decision, these 4 lepers. They said, look, if we sit here, we will die. If we go back into the city, which for me is going back into the past, we will die. So they said, well, let's go march, let's go walk on over to the enemy's camp. The worst thing that can happen to us is they kill us. So they get up and walk, and of course, the scripture says that God multiplied their footsteps to the point where the enemy got scared, thought a big army was coming, and ran out and left everything in. Now this story has, when they arrived, they obviously going to eat, starving, but something wonderful, miraculous happened. 4 of them say, we cannot keep this to ourselves. The outcast said it. That we cannot keep this to ourselves. We must go back and let them know that we have food. Now that's us in Mississippi. And I say, we either sit here and nothing happens. Life's going to happen too. We can't go back. We got to get up and fight. We got to get up and stand up for ourselves until we build these places. And thank me, there were enough that said, we will do this. We formed what's called the Amos Network, after the prophet Amos. We had a founding convention 8 months into the post-hurricane mess of 200 delegates from 13 rural towns who said we are committed to rebuilding our communities and fighting for that. And we did. We went out and fought the government. We got lawyers to go to court. We demanded the resources be brought back. We picketed in front of the first buildings that were rebuilt with the casinos on land. We had been on the water. We picketed the casinos. We went to the governor's house and bus loads of folk, 108-degree weather. We got on the buses and drove up to Jackson. These are black folk who still trying to rebuild their churches. Got a few resources to help them. 3 years later, that government had to bring his butt down there and say to us, I agreed to do the following things, and a total of about $1 billion was recommitted back to the coast. And the people I saw, the people who we worked with, the people couldn't believe that they did this. So don't tell me that our people cannot do this. But we first have to believe in ourselves that we can do this in these places where we are. And to get outside the limitations of how we think, to be creative about how we think, to not be put off. And this is hard. I know this is hard. Because most of you who are pastoring are living with the tension and struggle of seeing people that you are ministering to living through difficult times and trying to figure out what to do. And you're living through difficult times. Some of you are, terms of your own resources and availability, what you need. I saw a study of United Methodist pastors in North Carolina. 70% are seriously obese. Suicide rates are up.
Yes.
Hypertension is up in these rural communities in North Carolina. So I know, and you know, what pressures you're under trying to pastor these places. But I think if we don't put the pressure on our denominations, that's a big difference. The places that we have resources and whatnot to bring to bear in different denominations, then we have to rethink this approach. So I'm hoping that, and tomorrow we'll talk about how I think this might be done. At least a proposal, an idea for you to explore, wrestle with, play with, change. I mean, my role here is agitation. I'm trying to say to you, there's examples of what we've done historically, and I've been proud to live through this myself as an organizer and as a person who has built these places and these communities and worked with people to do them. They're not perfect places, and none place is perfect. And they go through their cycles too. The training that we do of lay people and pastors, if there's a change in pastoral leadership, maybe that pastor doesn't like it. If there's a change in bishops and that bishop doesn't like it, then we had that happen with the AME Church in Atlanta. The bishop who was there loved this idea of organizing in Atlanta. And then he left and rotated. The new bishop came and said, I ain't doing nothing he wanted to do. He forbade any AME church to do anything in Atlanta. That happened. That's the reality of church level denomination. You know what I mean? And if you're in a connectional denomination, then you know, your bishop to your bishop and the DSs, you got to traverse that politically. You know, so this is not easy stuff. I'm not saying it's just easy. And Greg, if you want to add anything, I'd be glad if you want to say a word about this, your own thinking about this and your experiences with this. And your own experience. Greg has been past president of the Baptist, General Baptist Convention in North Carolina, and also Black Harry.
Yeah, I would just say that everything Gerald said is spot on. And we met when he was the regional director Charlotte, when we started help empower local people. My church was already involved when I got there, and I had been looking for something and never heard about it. When I got to St. Paul, the organizer Chris came and talked to me. I was convinced from day one. The only thing I'd like to add, and this is something that I wanted to say to you, Gerald, that I said to you, everything that you said, and for those of you who are in a connectional church, whatever situation you have, the same principles that you get from learning basic organizing, and we all require to do a 10-day training, I believe it was. It's apropos in your church. It worked, it helped transform my church, not just the community. Because I took the same principles and turned my church inside out. And really it helped me to turn my church almost completely missional. And I'm going to say this here in the presence of clergy. I might get run out. The truth of the matter is, church as we know it is dying.
Amen.
And, you know, you got mega churches that say it's 2,000 or more. Yeah, that's okay. The average church size about 5 years ago, some church experts say it was about 300 some people. Now it's probably less than 150.
Yeah, that's right.
In about 5 to 7 years. Church as we know it is dying. Now, don't say that crazy preacher from Carolina said the church is dead. I didn't say that. But the truth of the matter is, a lot of my churches are intensive care. It's got a feeding tube in it. And the majority of the people who support it are 55 years old. Retired. And this young crowd is not really concerned. And part of it, we're guilty for getting it there because we've allowed it to morph into an institution. It's not the movement that Christ created. So we've got to re-embrace that.
That's right.
And this kind of basic organizing can work anywhere. Many of you are familiar with Charlotte. We took on Bank of America with Hugh McCall. Hugh McCall came to one of our meetings and told us that he would defeat us over the issue of building an arena in Charlotte for the Hornets at the time. And so we were not against basketball. We were just for affordable housing. And you're going to spend $300 million public dollars for a basketball stadium that really doesn't employ people beyond the construction. So we just stood up and he came and said, you know you're going to lose, but I'm going to respect you. But when the vote went down, because we held our nose and worked with some other organizations, and when the vote came in, they lost. It was a non-binding referendum though, so the city council went ahead and built it anyway. But about 3 people lost their seats as a result of our work. So there's an African proverb that says, when spider webs unite, they can tie a lion. And spider webs unite, they can tie a lion. This work will help you tie up lions. And one of the things though, you gotta have some guts. And you know, you can't be afraid. We took on Bank of America and then Wachovia. Gerald Taylor.
Wells Fargo.
Yeah, now Wells Fargo. And over the issue of usury, and they were charging people who were in the theater of war some 25–30%. And the federal law said they couldn't charge more than 6%.
Wow.
We organized to try to get meetings with the CEOs. And thanks to Gerald's work and just a few churches in the Charlotte community, we came together and took about 300 people. 150 went to Wells Fargo, 150 went to Bank of America. And we tied up their lobby. Some people had bags of pennies that they dropped. And finally, we ended up getting a meeting. Mike Broadway, who will be here, I think in a few weeks, helped write a white paper on usury. And as a result of it, they had to back off of that. So I'm just a witness. I came to witness. Somebody asked me why I come all this way. I came to witness what Gerald is sharing with you. It works. But not only does it work in the community, it will transform your church. The house meetings, the discipline, and I found out in my almost 40 years of pastoral ministry, thank God I'm retired now, the dirty word in the church is not 4 letters. It's called accountability.
Okay.
That's it.
We don't want to be held accountable.
That's right.
But this type of organizing holds you accountable. You hold your politicians accountable, but you got to hold yourself accountable first. And it doesn't take a whole lot of people. If you get, we stop going, we're not going to stop going to pastors. We ask pastors for permission. If you're busy, you got sermons to do, all of that. Give us somebody in your congregation who is passionate about this work, and then turn loose. And you'd be surprised at the work you can get done. So I hope that's helpful.
All right, I was talking a long time about what happens inside the church, this process of organizing the people. What we tried to do, what made our work unique was we were committed to the church. What usually happens in communities is all these organizations, all these groups come to the church and ask the church to support what they're doing. But that's transactional. They really don't, it's not reciprocal. They don't say what we can do for relationships with you. And so a lot of our pastors are jaded about doing anything like this. We said, no. First thing we're going to start with is the church, right? You and your people. So talk about you and your church, and what you're trying to do, what you're trying to accomplish. Our first organizing work will sometimes be around stewardship, around all kinds of things that we would do inside the church. We're organizing a ministry, helping the pastors, pastor's person they can talk to, or somebody to talk to, they can lead us. So once they saw that we were committed to the church and their people, they full haul join those organizing efforts. We could put thousands of people in the street if we had to. So, what I want you to do now, for the time we have, is an exercise, a thought exercise. I want you to consider one of two options for your table to choose. And here's what I'd like you to do. Broad-based internet is a fundamentally been raised as a fundamental need in rural areas. And some people say, so if why is the need? Why is broadband necessary in this period we're in? Do you remember when electricity was not in a rural area? I'll tell this quickly and then I'll tell you what I'm going to do. There was no electricity in rural areas for many years. And why was that? Because the utility companies did not think they could make any money by putting in electricity. They started rationalizing by saying that rural people really don't want electricity. Well, that's not true, we know that. But it took local people to organize to get electricity. I mean, they fight to form utility co-op. They formed co-ops. They forced the federal government to help finance electricity in rural areas. So in North Carolina, we still have today 13 rural co-ops. Electric co-ops. We still have towns that own their own electricity in North Carolina. And that's, if you look at something, so why is broadband important? Because like electricity was important for development and life and changing the quality of life of people in rural areas, broadband technology is the mechanism by which small-scale farmers, business people, and others have the potential to be able to create a product and be able to sell it by using this vehicle to get to that. The other reason why it's important is that this younger generation, they're not going to rural areas unless they have this. I've done a lot of meetings with young folk, young adults who said they cannot go to these areas without the ability to access broadband. Because of their work, if they're going to work satellite work, they got to have access to it. So that's an important element for attracting young talent. You're not going to attract doctors or lawyers. They have to be attracted to come back. So I'm going to give you two problems. How do you get doctors and lawyers and psychologists and professional dentists to come back to rural areas? That's the question. So I want you to think about it in terms of it. And the second question I want you, the other option is, how do you try to approach the question of getting broadband in your place, in the communities in which you're in? So if you think about it holistically, what is the mechanism in these rural communities? And that brings me back to the USDA. I'll give you at least one thought. How many of you know what the USDA does? The U.S. Department of Agriculture is the largest, as I said earlier, the largest investor in rural communities in the United States. Let me tell you what the USDA can do. The USDA can build buildings in your community. Public buildings of any kind, they can build it. So they can help rebuild a downtown. They have the resources and they have programs that allow that. They can build and invest in infrastructure, roads, lighting. The USDA has money to do that. They can help you build housing in your communities. They can jumpstart economic jobs, job creation. They provide loans to farmers and agricultural crops. They provide insurance possibilities at below market rate. I go on and on about what the USDA can do in a rural community. Here's the trick. In every county where the USDA is, there's what's called a county committee. The county committee can only be made up of licensed or certified farmers in the county. they're the ones who vote on money coming to that county and how that money will be distributed in your little county. Now, what's the trick here? Well, ain't that many black farmers now. But there's another little gap in the program that is still in place. The definition of a farmer is anybody who grows produce and sells it. Or at least, not even an acre of land. You all know where I'm going, right? So, if you're thinking about how to do something in your community, and you know that the USDA is there, but whatever else, the politics of your political, I want you to think about how you would try to organize. You have utility companies, obviously, in these places. Now, so I want you to, and I'll walk around and help you with the thinking. Choose one at your table, whether you're going to look at the issue of broadband, or you're going to look at the question of how do you attract talent back to rural areas. And there's professional talent that's needed in these communities that we don't have. Or if you want to choose something like housing, you pick one of the kind of the crisis points in your place. But these three, to me, are ones that you can play with a little bit more. And take about 10 minutes and play with it. And then let's have you kind of quickly come up and report on what your thinking was about it. Does that make sense? Are you willing to try that? Are you willing to try that? Yes, no, not yes. Okay, can I have your attention, please? Some places don't forget. I mean, to explore this themselves. All right. We got a couple of minutes to hear reports, and then I'm going to tell you what my suggestion has been on how to do this. Okay, in these two areas. So let's start over here. Which one did you take?
How to attract
It's okay. What did you come up with? Speak up. You got to stand up and speak up.
Okay. How to attract professionals to Hopkinsville, and we decided that they would have low housing costs, and it's less crowded. It's a good community, and strategically placed. You can exit Hopkinsville to quite a few different places.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Coming down the road. Who's next? What we got?
Okay.
See what you got. See what you got.
All right, well, we did the broadband,
Okay.
talking about how important it is to be connected. Several of our members are dealing with that issue now, and they can't even text within the same house. So use USDA, bring in the farmers, bring in training, kind of co-op with companies maybe like Google or Verizon to help build on the current infrastructure. And this kind of, and we even talked about leasing land through churches or maybe through organizations. Kind of like back in the day where you had to build the towers, and the towers was your main access to it. Figure out a way to leverage that. So whatever land they use to create the cell phone coverage and all of that,
All right.
somebody can profit off of it.
Okay. That's interesting. All right. Good. Outside is yes. Come on. Okay.
We did tracking young professionals to rural areas.
Okay.
One of the big things was obviously businesses and access to groceries and good stores, access to good education, specifically for young families, but a focus on what makes a rural setting distinctive and the strengths of that, like community and a greater intimacy and interconnectedness, which is increasingly important in a very fragmented society, and also highlighting the local culture and history and a sense of pride in a place and an identity of what makes that place unique and special. So being very grounded in what that identity is of what makes you distinctive.
All right. Good. Thank you. Next team. Y'all got something? Pass it. Moving. We're right on. Who's next? Y'all got something?
Yeah, we have two. Very similar to what this young man said over here. What we came up with incentives for broadband is would be the first thing to do to get the company interested in coming, because it's not just internet and cable. It's this wild thing called streaming now. And streaming is off the chain right now. It is really hot. And it's not, my wife is concerned about geography, and it's not just, it creates a community. And once you get the people interested, then you can go to the company and say, hey, look, we got this over here, we got this interest over here, and perhaps that would be some incentive to put the infrastructure in. Just tell them we want it, it's nice. But if you get people excited about what's all available to them, then you can take that information to the company.
Okay, good, thanks. So scale, try to get some market.
Yes.
That they know.
That's it, so that
They're
they're
existing creating markets for them to win the time.
Yes.
All right,
Yes.
good. All right, what we got over here? Yes.
So we also did broadband. We had one person at our table who actually had that kind of situation in a rural community and found that there was a lot of opposition among the residents of the community. That they would say things like, it's a waste of taxpayer dollars, we don't need the government involved in our lives, we never had it before, we don't need it now, our taxes will go up, etc. So they had a provider who was willing to provide the broadband, so convincing them wasn't the issue, it was that the residents actually voted it down. And so they left and didn't come in. So anticipating that that kind of situation could be, could happen, we thought it would be really important to be able to show people the benefit, that you need to have a kind of educational process in place. And we talked about whether the house meetings like you have in organizing, or like sometimes we call them ninja teams around here, could meet to begin to educate people, to use those small meetings as a forum to really educate people so that you could gain a critical mass of folks who wanted to be involved. In this particular historical incident, there was also one, what was his name, Trucker Bob? There was Trucker Bob, who was a known presence in the community with a strong Facebook following, who really would trash any kind of effort. So you've got to have you've got to be prepared to be proactive in responding to Trucker Bob or
Thank you.
For this group, we decided to tackle attracting services. And what we decided is that we really needed to be a bottom-up kind of thing. And so we would start with the community coming together and agreeing and deciding what services they wanted, then identifying the power brokers in the community. We had an example of, most of us think of the highest elected official as being the one with the power, and many times in the communities, that's not the one with the power. So knowing and being able to work with that individual, then looking at not looking for people to relocate immediately, but come and maybe do mobile, temporary or sometimes services until the confidence and trust between the providers and the residents is built up.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so you kind of create temporary, like mobile operations that come to a place, but they're not permanent yet, and test the relationship. That's interesting. Okay.
Gerald, 2 minutes.
Okay, give me a couple more hands on it. Come on, gotta get to everybody. Go ahead. What did y'all do?
We talked about, at this table, we talked about attracting young folk back to the rural areas. And I kind of think these two tables are eavesdropping on our conversation. But we determined that there has to be a change of mindset of the residents in the rural community to be open to new ideas, broadband, or those type of things that would attract other business to come into the area, and in turn attract younger folks to come and be a part of the community.
Okay, very good. Y'all lay up at this table?
Well, we had a basic knowledge problem. We weren't really sure what broadband meant. We spent some time talking about it. We also observed that this is not only a United States problem. You have a problem similar to that in Nigeria, where I live now, people leaving the rural areas. It's said that every day in the city of Lagos, 6,000 people arrive with no intention of leaving, largely coming from the rural areas of Nigeria. They're hoping for more opportunity there. Probably they will be disappointed, but they're coming. A huge attraction for urban areas for many different reasons. Employment, infrastructure, perhaps also broadband, if they're up to that level. Yeah, in Germany it's the same. You have, particularly in eastern Germany now, whole stretches of countryside where nobody really lives anymore. And the people who have stayed behind tend to be very sedentary, very conservative, if not reactionary. It's really a problem, but it's not only a United States problem.
No, thank you. Good. Well, thank you, everybody, for this in a very fast time frame to do this. And let me give you one thought that I've had. I've talked about this with some rural folks in North Carolina. Once upon a time, we had homestead acts in the United States. The Homestead Act provided 50 acres, 100 acres for free to a family that would come to that part of the United States where the Homestead Act was in. And if they farmed it, worked it, they got it for basically nothing. I think we need a 21st century homestead law. I think we say that we need to provide in the rural areas of our country, not just land, but housing for young families. And if they're doing a business or a profession, that we will actually invest in putting that building in the downtown or the uptown, the dentist's office. All of that gets done. They come and they commit to stay 10 to 15 years. For every year that they stay, that loan will be taken away and become a grant. And allow that call, as well as providing, the other is that take their debts away. Doctors, dentists, lawyers, they have high debt, most of them, when they come out of school.
Yes.
That's why they don't go to rural areas in many ways. They can't make the income. Take away the debt. Provide them with guaranteed income for 2 years, so they get time to build up their practice. And create a new Homestead Act that would allow them to be populated in rural areas by professionals. And, for example, artists would come to rural areas. They had buildings that they could do their artwork in. It would be much cheaper than trying to do it in the inner city. So my proposal has been, we need a 21st century Homestead Act that will do for this generation what we did for the generation before. And so at some point we can talk about this if we decide to go forward, and we'll talk tomorrow. But that has been, and everybody that I've talked with in rural kind of thought that that idea just strikes them as very attractive and interesting.
So you're voting for Bernie Sanders, right?
Huh? Thanks so much for your time.